Primetime. Now from Washington, Sam Donaldson.
This is a story about a product you probably have in your medicine cabinet right now. Tylenol, or its main ingredient, acetaminophen, a pain reliever that everyone agrees is very safe when used properly. Millions of people take it to relieve headaches, muscle aches, even hangovers. But there's something important that you may not know about Tylenol. As Chief Correspondent Chris Wallace found out, when acetaminophen is taken by people who drink alcohol regularly, there can be disastrous results.
Anthony Benedy used to have one of the most important jobs in government. When George Bush was president, Benedy arranged his schedule. But one Friday, shortly after Bush left office, Benedy got the flu. His life would never be the same.
I took some Tylenol and went to bed.
His wife, Maria, remembers how sick he was.
By Monday, I was getting very concerned because he didn't seem to be getting better.
By Tuesday night, Benedy was disoriented. His wife thought he was having a stroke. She called an ambulance that rushed him to an emergency room.
2 doctors came up to me and they said, "You should call the family." I said, "Well, can I call his parents in the morning?" And I realized how bad it was when they said, "Well, we can't guarantee he's going to make it till the morning."
Benedy had suffered total liver failure. Doctors said he had hours to live when a donor was found for a liver transplant.
From the doctors that I've talked to since that treated me, I'm not supposed to be here. That's how close I came.
Mr. Benedy, what destroyed your liver?
Tylenol destroyed my liver.
Tylenol is the leading pain reliever in America, taken by 55 million people a year. And the main ingredient, acetaminophen, is used in more than 100 other medications. But what Benedy didn't know is that when taken in sufficient quantities, the combination of acetaminophen and alcohol can make a dangerous brew, causing liver failure and even death. Here's how it works. A portion of the acetaminophen is transformed into a toxin or poison that is normally neutralized in the liver. But for someone who drinks regularly, alcohol increases the production of the poison and decreases the liver's ability to fight it.
Tylenol is a very safe product. It's the safest of the non-prescription, over-the-counter pain relievers.
Dr. Anthony Temple, medical director of McNeil Consumer Products, which makes Tylenol, says the general public has nothing to fear, but acknowledges some alcoholics who exceed the recommended dose of Tylenol have suffered liver damage.
If you were look at the reports in there, they average about 16 drinks a day. So they are heavy users of alcohol, and then they almost invariably take overdoses of acetaminophen.
And those are the only people who are at risk from Tylenol?
Those are the people that are at risk, yes.
But Benedy insists he never abused either Tylenol or alcohol.
Were you an alcoholic?
No. We had wine with dinner and on weekends.
Benedy says he normally had several glasses of wine each evening. If he'd had a drinking problem, he says he couldn't have done his job serving the president.
It was a 24-hour job. I had to be on the ball all the time.
So if it wasn't too much alcohol mixed with too much Tylenol, what was it? A Primetime investigation has discovered that there was an increasing number of signs over the years that people could be in danger from taking moderate amounts of acetaminophen and alcohol, not overdoses. But the makers of Tylenol resisted, warning the public. In 1976, an unidentified 59-year-old woman died, according to records, from acute alcoholism and Tylenol. A year later, an FDA panel proposed putting an alcohol warning on the drug, but the company argued the evidence was inconclusive. Over the next 10 years, 13 studies were published, reporting 19 cases of liver injuries, including 5 deaths, from alcohol and acetaminophen. But the company kept insisting each victim was an alcoholic who took a huge overdose of Tylenol.
Do you have any information on what happened to him between the...
In 1986, Dr. Hyman Zimmerman, a world-famous liver expert, published a study which contradicted the company's position, that it took an overdose of Tylenol to hurt alcoholics.
We found that there were patients who had taken doses that were not in the toxic range.
So people that were taking at or near the recommended dosage were still getting serious liver damage.
Yes, absolutely.
Zimmerman's study worried the company. An internal memo obtained by Primetime shows McNeil feared another attempt by the FDA to force the company to put a warning on Tylenol. Labeling could impact Tylenol's safety image, and safety was a key selling point.
Turns out Tylenol is the pain reliever hospitals use most. That means I can trust Tylenol for my family.
Pursuing the safety issue, the company offered to hire Dr. Zimmerman to conduct further research and to educate doctors about the dangers of alcohol and over-the-counter drugs.
I thought that they were agreeing with me.
You thought they were buying into your research?
I thought that they were, that they believed it, yes.
But the company commissioned another study, hiring a market research firm to see what impact an alcohol warning label would have on sales. The results, after seeing a warning, up to 92% of consumers thought alcoholics should reduce or discontinue Tylenol. And up to 71% of doctors said they would recommend reducing the dose, even for social drinkers who often use the drug.
As these reports were coming out, did you ever warn people who drink you may have a risk from taking Tylenol?
We did all our communicating through physicians on this matter.
But 5 days after the market research memo, the company issued this internal directive obtained by Primetime to its sales staff. Do not initiate discussions with your physicians on this issue. And what about the company's offer to Zimmerman to come up with a plan to educate doctors?
What happened?
Nothing.
What do you mean, nothing?
And when there was just no follow-up.
In 1987, another study led McNeil's medical director to note the acetaminophen taken by some victims brings us uncomfortably close to the recommended dose. But a company plan of action called once again for opposing any new FDA warning label. Company officials say McNeil wasn't trying to protect sales, but rather was worried about consumers who might switch to aspirin or ibuprofen, which when taken with alcohol can cause gastrointestinal bleeding.
You might inadvertently have someone take another product which might have a greater risk for them.
So what you're saying is you were trying to protect these people.
There's certainly a public health risk in this matter. That's absolutely correct.
But some people who never heard about problems with Tylenol ended up getting sick.
By all standards, I shouldn't be here today. And that's kind of a frightening thought.
Denise Garbarino, a Philadelphia housewife who says she normally drinks 3 or 4 beers a day, got the flu in 1990. Her doctor recommended she take extra-strength Tylenol. 2 days later, she was in an intensive care unit with liver failure. Now she's suing the makers of Tylenol.
This could have been avoided if there were warning labels on their products, on Tylenol, if the doctors had been informed, if the hospitals were more informed.
In 1993, Russell Domke, who drank about a 6-pack of beer a day, got the flu. A 39-year-old father of 2 who owned a Florida landscaping company, he took Tylenol to treat his illness. By the 3rd day, he was disoriented. His ex-wife, Rose, rushed him to the hospital.
Within an hour, the doctor had his arm around me and told me that Russ was going to die.
I mean, here was a man who was perfectly fine, and what, 4 days later, he's about to die?
He died the next day at 10 a.m.
The cause of death was listed as due to the toxic effect of acetaminophen, or Tylenol. His family is also suing McNeil.
If it was properly labeled, Russ would not have ingested the Tylenol and therefore would be alive today.
Which brings us back to Anthony Benedy, who was having his own problems with Tylenol at precisely the same time.
They told me that I almost died.
Dr. Zimmerman happened to be at that hospital visiting a relative, and Benedy's doctors sought his opinion.
Okay, I have no trouble.
By then, Zimmerman had spent years studying acetaminophen poisoning and had concluded it threatened many more people than generally thought.
It looks like a normal biopsy.
He had compiled 161 cases of serious liver damage, including 31 deaths, over the previous 16 years. He says 40% of his cases had taken no more than the recommended dose. That's 8 extra-strength Tylenols a day. And he says 35% of the victims normally had 3 or fewer drinks a day containing alcohol.
Do you have to be an alcoholic to be at risk here?
I don't think so, no.
Do you have to have exceeded the recommended dosage of Tylenol to be at risk here?
No, sir, you do not.
Zimmerman says it's like a lightning strike. For some unknown reason, some people are more vulnerable to the mix of alcohol and acetaminophen than others. The company says Zimmerman is overstating the risk here. But don't tell that to Anthony Benedy. He decided to sue and hired attorney Patrick Malone to review the company's internal documents.
Did the company ever say, gee, we got a problem here, we got to do something about it?
They admitted to themselves, what we have here is a public relations problem, and we've got to deal with it in some way, and the way that they chose to deal with it was to try to keep a lid on it and keep the public from finding out much about it.
In the trial, the company did not portray Benedy as someone who took too much alcohol and acetaminophen. Instead, it offered a new argument.
We think Mr. Benedy's liver disease was caused by a herpes virus infection of the liver, not by Tylenol.
Benedy has had the kind of herpes that causes fever blisters. However, Dr. Zimmerman, who testified for him, says Benedy's liver showed no signs of herpes damage, but clear signs of something else.
How clear-cut is the evidence that Mr. Benedy's liver failure was caused by Tylenol?
I think it was unequivocal. Clear-cut is an understatement. It was unequivocal.
Tylenol was the cause of this man's injury.
Sandy Triplett was a juror who listened to the evidence from both sides. After deliberating just 2.5 hours, the jury awarded Benedy more than $8 million. The company is appealing.
They were more concerned about sales than they were for any safety of any individual.
Now, the FDA is about to require alcohol warnings on all over-the-counter painkillers, including Tylenol, aspirin, and ibuprofen. The warning: if you generally consume 3 or more alcohol-containing drinks per day, you should consult your physician. McNeil has already put the warning on a new product, extended relief Tylenol, and on new shipments of all adult Tylenol products. But Randy Jewell, chairman of the FDA's advisory committee, says the makers of Tylenol were not happy about the alcohol warning.
The manufacturers, the scientists with the manufacturers, thought that this was so unusual, so rare, and so unlikely to happen that it did not warrant a label warning.
Do you really think your company has done everything it can to protect the public from risks from drinking and taking Tylenol?
I think McNeil's acted very responsibly.
But the alcohol warning comes too late to help Denise Garbarino, or Russell Domke, or Anthony Benedy. Doctors tell Benedy his kidneys are weakening, and they can't predict his life expectancy.
It's something I think about quite often, every day, of how long I have to live. And if my son asked me to read a book, I try to read them too.
What is the message that you'd like to send to this company?
The message is, don't play with the consumer. Don't play with our lives. These are real lives at stake. Have compassion for us out here. Just come clean.
So what do you do if you drink regularly and need a pain reliever? Dr. Zimmerman advises if you have 3 or more drinks per day, you should take no more than half the recommended dose of Tylenol or other acetaminophen product. And keep in mind that the danger is increased by a poor diet. You can't avoid problems simply by switching to other pain relievers. Both aspirin and ibuprofen can cause stomach bleeding when mixed with too much alcohol.